Call to order the, what is today? October 25th, yeah, sure is. 2023 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Bobby, call the roll, please.
Joan Kovac? Joan Kovac?
Here. Sorry.
Tundra King?
Here.
Derek Lewis?
Here.
Darlene Smith?
Here.
Carrie Ann Worley?
Here.
Carla Coleman?
Here.
Fred Stacer?
Here? Okay, so it looks like Carrie Ann's sitting in for Richard Clausewitz tonight. And with that, we'll have the traditional 30-second moment of silence. Please, everyone, get back to you in 30 seconds. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the September 27th meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the minutes of our last meeting, September 27th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the September 27th meeting. Derek?
Chair, I just have one correction.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
On page 7, Mrs. King said there has been talk from the school board about closing Markham. Markham's just spelled wrong. That's the name of the school, right?
Any other adjustments to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, Bobby, call the roll.
Okay. And Mr. Lewis, second?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
Carla Coleman?
Yes.
Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Joan Kovac?
Yes.
Tundra King?
Yes.
Darlene Smith?
Yes.
Fred Stacer?
Yes. Okay. Next item on the agenda. I need the agenda, don't I? Next item on the agenda, any individuals who would like to speak tonight need to be placed under oath. So at this time, if you would, please stand and raise your hand, and the secretary will swear you in, please.
You stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda was KZ Copens LU Lupa, PNZ 20-92504, address is 1900 Northwest 24th Street. I believe we had a letter request to postpone this item to the next meeting. And with that, Chair will entertain a motion if there's any questions, but we'll do that later. To entertain a motion to postpone item number 1 to the medium of November
15th.
15th.
Make a motion that we postpone to the November 15th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second him.
Okay, do we have any questions on the motion? Any questions? No. Okay. Bobby, call the roll on postponing item number 1 to the next meeting.
Tundra King?
Yes.
Joan Kovac?
Yes.
Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Darlene Smith?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley?
Yes.
Carla Coleman?
Yes.
Fred Stacer?
Yes. Okay, the next item is item number 2, KZ Copens rezoning. It's PNZ 20-13506, same address. And likewise, this would be postponed to the, was requested to have postponement to the next meeting as well.
Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes, Mrs.
We
Smith?
postpone item number 2 to the November 15th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on item number 2 to be postponed to the November
15th.
meeting. Any questions on the motion? Okay. Call the roll on item number 2.
Darlene Smith?
Yes.
Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is a code amendment related to the Senate Bill 102, jokingly called Live Local Act, even if you're ruled from Tallahassee. Okay. Mrs. Dolan, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Jean Dolan, Development Services. So this is an amendment to our mixed income housing ordinance to accommodate the requirements in Senate Bill 102, which is called the Live Local Act. So first, what does the Live Local Act do? So first, it preempts local governments from applying their land use and zoning regulations in relation to use, which in this case is multifamily residential, density and height in industrial, commercial, and mixed-use districts. It gives the highest residential density in the city code and the highest height within a mile of a site to any multifamily rental project with at least 40% affordable housing in an industrial, commercial, or mixed-use district. It allows projects to be mixed use, but only requires them to be mixed use in cities with less than 20% commercial and industrial land. Pompano is 8.6% commercial and 21% industrial, so that doesn't apply to our city. It excludes residential land use and zoning districts from these affordable housing projects. And finally, it requires administrative approval of affordable housing projects approved under this law. So the most important thing to us is that we maintain our circles where we are trying to deconcentrate poverty, where we only allow 50% deed restricted affordable. And what we're happy about is we think we can maintain those regulations and still be consistent with this new law. So what we do have to change, however, is number one, we have to increase the 20% maximum affordable on Dixie Highway and Power Line between Atlantic and Northwest 15th Street. And we're increasing that to the same 50% that's allowed within our circle areas so that we're in compliance with Senate Bill 102, which allows any place, all these affordable housing can go any place as long as they're at least 40% affordable. So that will accommodate the law's requirements in all of our special areas where we're deconcentrating poverty. Number two, we are going to require all residential projects using 216.3, 216.4, or the Live Local Act to be mixed use if outside of a grocery store service area. And we have added a definition for grocery store, and also I'll show you the map in a bit, which is really interesting about where the grocery store service areas are. So I kind of wish we had done this a long time ago because when we started doing our comp plan update, which we adopted in 2020, we first had one-on-one meetings with all the commissioners. And one of the things that Beverly Perkins brought up, Commissioner Perkins, and rightly so, is that there's no services in the industrial sector. So there's a lot more housing there than you think. And there's no place for them to get service. And I think when we did the Blount Road project, if you remember that, that was underscored so like extremely, trying to look like where would these people go. It also kind of gave us a little like, we should have been thinking about this more, because at the time we had just approved the Gateway project, which was on Powerline and MLK. We had wanted that to be mixed use, but they didn't want to do mixed use. And also the 2050 MLK project there on the corner also didn't want to do mixed use. That's straight residential. Both of those projects would have been ideal for mixed use. So by requiring mixed use in an area that doesn't have even a grocery store to service it, it'll give us an opportunity to require mixed use in that industrial sector where we really need services for the people who live there. So it's kind of a mitigating influence to having additional housing projects in that industrial zone if we end up getting that. And our comp plan policy that helps us implement is 12301, which says, to create balanced communities, encourage the expansion of neighborhoods serving retail and office uses in areas dominated by the industrial and manufacturing sectors, if appropriate, to better serve the local community. So in a way, this is a little bit of a blessing that we had to deal with this new law, because it helped us find a way to start requiring mixed use where we really need it. Number three, we're going to define just how much non-accessory commercial that these mixed-use projects will need to provide. The law requires at least 65% of them to be residential if they're going to be mixed use, so that leaves the other 35% kind of up for grabs. We're just going to require 50% of the ground floor facing a primary road, public open space, or major pedestrian walkway, which is the same as what we require for anybody using 216 for the county's policy for projects that are 5 acres and up. And that's fair. We're not trying to kill these projects by making them so heavily commercial that they'll never be able to do it. And we're treating them equally with all our other incentive-based mixed income housing policies. And finally, we define the minor site plan process as the required administrative approval process for these Live Local Act projects. So they won't come to you. They will go right to the Development Services Director after they meet code and have gotten all their blessings from DRC. So that is unusual because these can be big projects, but that is what the law requires. So now we can look at these maps. So this is really interesting. If you look at our housing buffer map, which you've seen many times now, what I want you to do is first train your eyes on the square between Copans and Atlantic and Dixie and the Turnpike. So you see it's almost completely covered by the yellow circles, right? So now, if we bring the map up that shows where the grocery store service areas are, there's hardly any overlap into that square. So that's where you've got all this tax credit projects concentrated, and yet there's no services, not even food. So we decide we're not going to do all kinds of fancy retail maps, because if you can't get food, that's like basic number one, right? So now let's do it this way. Now let your eyes just focus on the federal highway corridor. There's no yellow circles there. There's no tax credit projects in that area. Now, look at the circles for the grocery store service areas. They're all on Federal Highway. So you just see the mismatch. Now, there's many variables that retailers use when they decide where to locate. It's not just related to the tax credit clusters, but it is a pretty astounding map, and I think it really supports our needs to require mixed use in that sector. So the other thing we had to do is put in a new definition of grocery store, because interestingly, we had grocery store and convenience store lumped into the same definition, which is a little mind-blowing because we don't allow convenience stores in some places. So were we also excluding grocery stores? So anyway, we've corrected that, and that's another good thing that's come out of this exercise, is realizing that we need to fix these definitions. So now we have a definition for a real grocery store, and we're not lumping it in like a convenience store is equivalent. So our recommended motion to you is for you to recommend approval of the amendments to our mixed income housing amendments to address the Live Local Act as presented by staff. And of course, we can have a discussion about that before you go any further.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Mrs. Coleman, go ahead.
I understand, I have a couple of questions. First of all, how does this statute define affordable housing?
Well, it defines it as per 420. So there's another statute, 420.0034 or something like that.
So it's
that
the
has
standard
the same-
definition.
It's the standard one that we use, yeah. So, between 0 and 120%.
How is this board going to know about these projects if nothing comes to us?
You'll see them on a DRC agenda. I believe you guys get DRC agendas, but you won't know otherwise.
No, we don't get the DRC agendas.
Oh, we can add you to the distribution list for DRC agendas.
Well, I'd like to ask that perhaps in staff reports,
Oh, yeah.
you guys can let us know. I just think it's, I understand this is statute, but I think it's important that this board know what other housing activity is going on in the city when we make our decisions on things that come before us.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be totally cranked, so we'll be telling you all about this stuff. And I will say that I had my first experience with this where a guy came in on a property that is actually on Dixie Highway. And when it really came down to it, our code was way better for them than 102. Because part of that parcel, A, was residential and he couldn't use it on that part. And the underlying zoning was B1, which only has a 35% lot coverage. So it's only use, density, and height. So he could do that, but he could only get 35% lot coverage. So when you use 216, 3, and 4 and our other incentive, we could produce a way better project than Senate Bill 102. So I don't want you to be too scared of it, because our code is already established to encourage mixed income housing. And we have the densities, it's already built in. The other thing that's coming crystal clear is with these heights, most of these tax credit developers do not want to structure their parking. It's too expensive. So you really can't take advantage of these massive heights. So I think it's going to be okay. We'll see what happens if we do have somebody on 911 Atlantic in the downtown kind of talking about it a little bit. But this whole rule, use, density, and height, that's all they get to preempt. All other requirements apply. That's in the TO. It says anything over 6 stories has to be a tower building type. So, we didn't know that. So you think there's a lot of stuff that's deeper in the code that is going to put some caps on these things other than just all of a sudden we're going to have these massive buildings springing up. So I think we need to relax a little bit. Some of the cities are kind of freaking out and writing ordinances that may be challengeable because they're so harshly trying to block, where they probably could just relax and see.
We've never tried to block, we've tried to encourage in the right places.
Right, and
And
we're
the right mixes.
continuing. Yeah, we're continuing that attitude.
Yeah.
Let's just try to encourage in the right places. And the other thing we can relax a little bit about is industrial property in Pompano is extremely expensive. So hopefully that will just not really make it doable for a residential tax credit project. So we'll see.
I had a question. You spoke of, I don't know where this fits in on the convenience stores or grocery stores, but will the food area in Walmart, I know it's an industrial, would that be considered as a part of the statute for the?
Yes, Walmart is on our map. This is really just a Google map. We're going to turn this into a GIS layer once we're further along. But yeah, the Walmart at Atlantic and Powerline is one of the circles that touches mostly the Palm Air area. But all the Walmarts on Federal, there's a couple there. We count those. Yeah, so for your Amex points, Walmart doesn't count as grocery, nor Target, but for our purposes, it meets the definition. It has fresh produce. It has, fresh foods, not just convenience foods.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
I have a question. As far as the definition for grocery store, convenience store, is that being amended for the entire code, or are we looking at where that affects? Okay, so it's not just in relation to the section.
Right, we have this terms and uses defined section. It's like the last section of the code.
Okay.
And like I said, we had these two lumped together. I honestly don't know how we did that. But anyway, I'm happy to have them separated because they're totally different.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was going to thread back through where it's referenced elsewhere.
Right, so anywhere we talk about grocery stores, this is the new definition. And the only place we really talk about grocery stores is like use-specific standards and, the tables that say where they're permitted. So none of that will change. It'll just now have this definition.
Awesome.
And also, by the way, we made the square footage small enough so it would cover things like Aldi's and Trader Joe's and smaller stores, but not, most convenience stores are like 4,000 or 5,000 square feet.
Even your smallest model Publix is 28,
Publix are big.
but that's the smallest one.
Right.
Anybody else? Okay, I had a few things. Big surprise, right? Before, we had limited in the two locations we had, I believe, you said Powerline and Dixie Highway, before we had a limitation of 20%. And we just decided to go ahead and give them the full 50%. So we had a specific reason, I think, for doing it in those locations. So why didn't we just go to 40%?
Well, just for consistency throughout the code, so that we didn't look like we were playing any kind of games.
Well, we weren't playing a game before.
Right.
When we wanted it at 20%, we had a specific reason.
Well, we would have left it that if this law hadn't been passed. We
Well, I
weren't
understand
unhappy
that,
with it.
but my point is I would just as soon leave those two streets at 40% and saying, we're giving in to your law, personally.
We could do that either way. If that's the board's direction, we can certainly change that. But what we were trying to do is just make everything equal, so there wasn't a lot of
No,
confusion.
and I understand, I do understand what you're saying. It's just, even though the people in Tallahassee think they know more about Pompano than we do, I actually think we do, but that's just me. I think we did it for a very specific reason before, because we were working on deconcentration of poverty and locations and stuff, right?
That is why
So-
we did it.
I'm sorry?
That is why we did it.
Yeah, and we did it very specifically. Obviously, it was much more, for lack of a better word, gross at the time, because it was a huge differential. It
And you
was-
can really see why, because look at Dixie Highway.
Right.
It's almost 100% covered by tax credit circles. There's a tiny little piece there that doesn't touch a circle. So that is why we did it. And then it was power line between
South, yeah, the south part.
between Atlantic and 15th.
Mm-hmm.
That also is completely engulfed in circles. So that was where we were trying to really inject more market rate.
Sure.
But you know what, when we get a product, if it's not a tax credit project, they really don't want to go higher. They want to put the minimum, which is 15%, according to 216.3 and 216.4, which is what we would use. So it's only the tax credit developers that will, push the envelope on the 50%. So it's up to the board if you want to make a recommendation for that, because we're not attached
Yeah.
to either of those numbers. It's just nice to be consistent.
Understand? Yes,
Mr.
Mrs.
Chairman,
Coleman?
I can support 40%.
Okay.
As opposed to 50%, and that is more in line with our 20 that we were trying to do. We've met the statute, but we haven't gone beyond it.
Yeah,
I think it keeps a little bit of the character there that we were trying to get.
trying anyway. Okay, so you and I have already had this discussion, but I got to tell you, I don't understand this. There are certain issues that we are allowed to still hold developers to, right? And I think you mentioned 3 of them, I believe.
Well, they only get use density and height, so we can still control lot coverage, we still require our height transitions, our setbacks, our lot coverage, our parking. Yeah, all of our multifamily design standards will
Okay,
apply.
I'm sorry, it's actually the other way around. They get 3, yeah.
They get 3.
They get 3 breaks.
Use
I guess.
density and height.
So the height that you talked about was 105 feet, right?
Generally, so. the
Generally,
height-
obviously, it's possible it could be lower. Probably not.
Probably not going to be lower, but it
Well,
could
where would it be higher? Let
depending
me
on.
ask you, where could it be higher? Because that is where my concern is, and I know you and I disagree, or not necessarily disagree, but I would like to put the restriction in if I could, and you're saying because of the market and that they don't want, they don't want to have structured parking, that they won't do it, that they won't make the buildings taller necessarily. But under the part that I read in the part of the statute, and I'm not obviously a lawyer, but we have places where we have a 400-foot height restriction. I believe we have over 200 feet in some places. And obviously along the beach, we have probably the tallest building's about 300 feet right now, something like that. So you're saying it's your belief that it's underlying zonings like B3 and RM45 straight up, not unrestricted HR RM45 or PDs
Yeah.
or other.
Here's what's going to happen. They got to come in and pick a site first, because we're not going to draw a mile radius around every single property in the city to figure out what the heights would be on some property that we don't know they're going to build on. So once they come in, they're going to start with 105 because generally it's 105, and the reason for that is no matter where you look, there's some red. The red is commercial, it's 105 feet. It's hard to draw a mile-wide circle anywhere and not hit some red. So if the developer then draw his site plan and goes, oh, wow, I could fit more, then they can look, what are other projects or existing buildings within this mile that could be higher? Then they can come in and argue with us if they want to try to get that higher amount. And there's nothing we can write in the code that's going to block that. That's going to be something that we got to deal with on a case-by-case basis, because the law says they can have the highest height within a mile. So since we don't know like where the site is, we can't really say what that highest height is. It's generally going to be 105 feet.
So are we actually
said if they run up
codifying
against-
105 feet, or did I miss that?
Oh, it just says generally, just so to give the developers an
Okay,
idea.
so there is no, okay, so there is no, we're not actually saying 105 feet. You were just giving an example because most places 105 feet.
Right, and so
throughout the
what
city
that,
is
what that allows is it allows the applicants that are like fishing to look at our code and know what to start with, rather than having to call us and us go, well, first you gotta find a site, then you gotta draw a circle, then you gotta, so it just gives them a place to start. So if they find out that they think they can fit more on this site, then they can call us and we'll start doing that kind of shopping.
When we start doing, let's assume you did that, or that a developer did that, and they were somewhere close to the live resort in the industrial area, would the lot coverage of our I-1 or I-1X, whatever that particular property was, is that what would restrict them at that, in
No,
terms of
for-
how much they could put onto the lot?
Right. The rule says it has to meet the requirements of a district where you would allow that use. So the closest thing to an I use is B3. So just like on the 31st Avenue corridor, we apply B3 zoning standards to B4 so they don't have to rezone. That was the thing that the
Yes.
task force recommended. We would do that same thing in the I's. So if somebody comes in the industrial district and wants to do one of these tax credit projects, we would use the B3 zoning criteria. That's 60% lot coverage.
Okay.
So, and
And
industrial is
that's
actually
based
65%, but they're only 45-foot heights.
And that's based on the fact that without, like, flex units, outside of this particular law, outside of flex units, you couldn't do it except in B3 and down, if you were
Can't
flexing.
do any residential in I-1 right now, in none of the.
Well, that's my point. So that's why you would apply, you're applying this, the criteria of B3, is what I'm saying. Because
Right, yeah.
B3, you have to go down from I1 to I4, B4 to
Yeah,
B3 to get to.
Get to the closest thing, because if we go
Right.
to something ridiculous like, oh, you got to meet RM12, they'd be like, why would you do that? You allow all this
No, I
residential and
understand.
commercial.
Okay.
The actual language, because believe me, I had to give this a lot of thought. It's talking about the administrative approval process, the context is, but it says, if the development satisfies the municipality's land development regulations for multifamily developments in areas zoned for such use. So what's good for Pompano is all our Bs are already zoned for such use. So we don't have to like dream up a new requirement. Like what Coconut Creek just did, they just adopted an ordinance to implement this. They decided, okay, we're going to use this multifamily district of ours as the district, that we're going to copy the lot coverage and parking and, you know, pervious, impervious, all those requirements. We're going to use this because they didn't have their Bs and anything already zoned for such use. So we don't have to do that because all our Bs are already zoned for such use. And we've already kind of established with our 31st Avenue corridor that we think the industrial, which is, B4 is pretty industrial.
Sure.
We're saying, okay, you can do mixed use there, but you got to knock it down to B3.
You have to rezone it down to B3.
Well, you don't, on that corridor, you don't have to rezone because that was an incentive.
I'm sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So you see, we've kind of already made a precedent on how we'll treat industrial when it has residential on it. So we're kind of lucky in that we're a little bit ahead of the game.
Okay, so everything that applies to, I'll just throw this out there, everything that applies to somebody getting flex units for a B3 or something, that is how this would be looked at, assuming that it was a tax credit thing?
Except they won't need any flex units because they get the use.
Well, I'm sorry, yeah,
Right.
but it's the same, the reason I brought that up is so that everybody sitting up here realizes how that criteria gets, not just me, although it helps me.
Right, so
trying to understand
they
how
might
this
get more density because the highest density in any place in the whole city is pretty high, 90 units per acre. But they would have to follow all other regulations associated with however we would do a mixed-use project in B3. So it's not that different. They would still have to work pretty hard to get any kind of we already allow 69 units per acre if you use 216.3 or 216.4 in B3. So they've already got, like I said, we already have really generous regulations.
Okay, but how did we get to 90? Because I know there's projects in like the overlay downtown, it's like 120 or something.
No, 90 is the highest. Right.
By right, okay. So when, I'm thinking of all the bonuses that you can get it up to 100 and whatever or something, if you start adding bonuses in.
Right, and we're not
You're
doing that.
No, we're not, 90's an awful lot.
It is.
I mean, that's a pretty intense,
And even then, if they want to do the math and they think they can fit more than 90 units per acre, if they want to argue with us, they can argue with us. So it just depends on if we want to argue back strongly, if they want to threaten to sue us. It's like we got a long way to go before we have to acquiesce to the worst possible case scenario.
So are we actually putting that in? And so you're saying that 105 was just kind of
Generally.
and is the 90 just generally? Because it would depend on where you're at, right? Or
No, 90 is our highest land use district. That's our highest density in any code. So that's like by right, that's the highest you can get. Because you think all those HRs are really tall. They're tall, but they still have to meet their underlying land use. They don't get extra density. Their land use still controls their density. So if you look at like Hidden Harbor is a good example. That's a PD, but it's still controlled by its underlying land use. It's not more dense than the land use allows.
yeah, well, most of those high rises are like they're high, right? They're H or whatever. I think that's what you guys.
You don't even have HR in that high rise in our code anymore. It doesn't exist.
I didn't mean the HR. That's the zoning you're talking about, right? I was talking about land use. Aren't our residentials like LM?
Those are the
Those are the
small
land
ones.
use.
That goes up to 50 units per acre on a straight residential, but you can also have,
But high is the H
High.
the H is the highest of the residential.
Yeah.
And you're saying those are the ones where you can possibly get to 90.
no, you can only,
Oh, that's right. By land
use,
use, you could only get the, 50 something? 56?
50 is it's 46 in ours, it's
46.
50 in the counties. That's the highest of a basic, like, H land use category. So the only way you can get more is if you're in a mixed-use land use category where we have a basket of rights that we can dole out.
Okay. Okay. So it's by being mixed use, but they get limited right away because they're putting commercial in the bottom or something. No, I'm not saying these people, I'm saying in a typical mixed use, you get limited because maybe the whole first floor is not going to be units probably.
And actually,
Maybe more depending on how much parking you have. So.
yeah. And even though there's some parts of the downtown where there's no height limit, the height limit is generally 80 feet if you're doing mixed use for the ETOC and all that. Remember, it was 105 feet, and still is if you do 100% commercial building. We couldn't take that.
No.
But if you
But with
take-
all the incentives,
Yes.
that we went to 80, is 80 or
It's
85?
80 feet.
80, right, okay.
And we rarely get people maxing out the heights. This is kind of a
No,
good,
it's hard.
take a step back and look. City Center, they didn't max out their heights. This new Indigo going into Live, it's 3 and 4 or 5 story buildings. They're not maxed. They could go to 400 feet. They're not doing it. Gateway, 4 story buildings. So even only the 2050 MLK project went to their full 80 feet, and that project's on hold because they're trying to sell it. So that may never happen. So it's just interesting that, you think all these scary thoughts about these massive heights, but people they're not even building the heights they could now.
Okay. Yes, sir, just a minute. Okay. All right. Anybody in the audience want to speak on this issue? Name and address for the record, sir.
Ed Phillips, 384 Northwest 19th Street, Pompano Beach. Unfortunately, I came down here for another matter, but I'm glad I came here for this now. As I understand it, this is for making recommendations, as I've heard, correct?
For the new statute, the new state statute.
Okay, so although what I'm about to suggest or give my opinion about may not change anything, I still want to go on record. First of all, Ms. Coleman, I do appreciate you talking about affordable housing, because somewhere we have to figure out how to tinker with the definition of affordable housing as it appears now. I mean, it is inhuman, and I'm going to say it. There'll be some folks who will say it's not right to say it. It is inhuman right now to think affordable housing as it is stated now, especially on the rental component, is affordable for folks who grew up and live here and who are working class individuals. It is inhuman. You wonder why we see the flux of homeless people. It is not always that they can't find work. It is not always that they're drug users. It's not always that they're mentally ill. It is just they can't afford to live anywhere. And so I'd like for it to be on record that somewhere, even though, you know, this is an economic industry where we try to make as much money as we can, if we don't begin to start deal with this situation in terms of the affordability of housing, and I'm not talking about the government always giving a hand, Section 8 and all those things. I'm talking about working people who can pay rent. You can't give 50% of your earnings to pay rent. So from that standpoint, the other part as I move right along here is I am very, very, very concerned about this consistent increase of density. Density appears to be where it doesn't go away, and we seem to more and more lean into however how much you want to put or give it to us. And I have not seen any safeguards or enough safeguards as it pertains to density, especially in some of the Northwest areas. We're being inundated with apartments, housing, and they're called affordable. The numbers are astronomical and will grow. And so in terms of density, you're talking about, if I heard it correctly, 40% increase. Did I hear that number? What number did you say it goes up to? It can go up to?
No, the Senate Bill 102, which was what we're talking about,
I
required
know, I hear what you're talking about.
highest density allowed anywhere in the city.
Okay, well.
So that's 90 units per acre in one of our downtown districts. So
Okay,
that's
well, somehow it doesn't, okay, we're going to be a downtown district, so yes. So in density is going to be an issue. It's always going to be an issue, and we'd like for you to be very cognizant of that. We do not want to have a concrete jungle along MLK Boulevard. That was always our hope and our wish that that would not happen. But that is what goes on. So now, having said that, I do want to talk about the mixed use. It appears that because of affordability, we may not be able to buy our own entities, standalone individuals, houses in mixed use, and or businesses. But I think someone mentioned a little earlier in some other meetings, business condos. We may be able to afford a unit in those mixed use that will be ours. And so there has to be some creativity here where the people who live here in the area can actually be able to benefit and afford some of these issues, these initiatives that are coming, because they're coming. I see they're coming. So we can't change them, include us in a manner and a way where it's affordable, where it's obtainable. And so having said that, thank you very much. Oftentimes I don't like to come to these meetings because unfortunately I seem to know a little bit and I speak on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Next person? Anybody else want to speak? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. So, one thing I think it's not so much a response, but I do want to say something to what Mr. Phillips was talking about. We're not adding to this density, just so you understand.
Yeah, I
We're,
understand that part. It's a criteria that they're indicating here. I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure on record that there was some pushback or some additional conversation from the people who live here.
I appreciate that, because we're pushing, we're pushing against a pretty big Tallahassee group to try to make sure that we actually have control at a more local level. That's why I hate to say sarcastically, but it's probably true, that I said, yes, live local, but be ruled by Tallahassee. I actually meant that more than I would like to say, because we're not perfect, but I do believe that we try very hard to, and we appreciate the input for sure. So I do not want to discourage you from that at all. I actually appreciate the fact that you did speak, so. Okay, anybody else? I ran into a couple more things on the way, but anybody else want to? No, go ahead. Anybody? Did you want to? Anybody else? No? Okay. So there was a couple other things that I ran across in here. I had a question. There is no mention, and I'm not saying that I disagree with you, because I completely agree with you, and you know that because of what happened in the industrial part, and one of the big arguments that I made was that they had no grocery store, which I thought was kind of inhumane. But, you know, not everybody agrees. There's no mention of like grocery store in their statute at all. So how are we actually going to enforce that part?
We put it in the code and we say, if you're not within one of these
So
circles, you need to
it's
do
not
this.
one of the things that they're allowed to ignore. This is
Right.
really more of an underlying code. Well, actually, it's more a comp plan issue, right? Because we,
Oh, it's going to go in the code. The only reason we require mixed use in our TOs, so we don't have any special reason for, we haven't gone to any kind of study or gone crazy with requiring that we just require it. That's what we want there.
Yeah.
So we have a very good reason to require it, as you see by the dirge of
absolutely.
services.
No, I think the defense of it is probably pretty maximal, but I was just curious to see if they had even said anything about
No,
those
what-
types of issues.
But what the law does say is if a city is less than 20% commercial and industrial, all projects have to be.
Collectively?
All collectively.
Okay.
All projects have to be mixed use. And the reasoning that they say in the law is because they don't want that local government not to have enough services. Well, that's dumb. Industrial doesn't give you any services. It's an economic-based activity. It's not serving
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
residents.
say, yeah,
So to lump them together makes it dumb. We're only 8.6% commercial. So that justifies us requiring mixed use. We're not requiring it everywhere. Like, if somebody wants to do one of these projects on Federal Highway, doesn't have to be mixed use. They got tons of grocery stores on Federal Highway.
Right.
So it's just common sense, and it's completely consistent with their law.
Okay. So, the other thing is that the process that y'all picked, which I'm not saying is wrong, I just want to make sure I understand the essence of it. It's an internal minor site plan, like if somebody had a 3-unit building that doesn't come to this board. So you're saying it's more like that?
That's our only administrative process. So that's what we use when we need an administrative process. And what's nice about,
Oh, I'm sorry, it said administrative process, so it's saying it can't be a whatever we call us, quasi, it
can't go,
can't be.
no hearings, it can't
Right,
go.
there's no hearing.
It will go to a hearing, it will go to AAC still, because minor site plan is administrative
goes.
approval, but still goes to AAC just because of the building design. So all the design standards still apply to the Senate Bill 102 projects, so that's fine, that has to go to AAC. But it will get a a minor development order from the Development Services Director.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead,
Is
Mrs. Coleman.
AAC sunshine body?
Yeah, it's an not elected, it's an appointed body. We do advertise their hearings. They aren't attended because they just talk about architecture.
I understand that, but are you sure? Because it's my understanding that this statute, the whole gist of it was to have no hearings.
No, it doesn't say that. It just says an administrative approval process. So we have an administrative approval process, minor site plan, and it still requires AAC review
Okay.
for project with buildings. Right. Yeah, if they're visible from a roadway, blah, 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 blah. I have a feeling any of these projects will be.
They'll be visible from a roadway.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I can see somebody, well, we'll see if that works.
Right, that's exactly where we're kind of going with this, is we're not trying to discourage it, but we're also not giving away the store.
Let me ask you, I'm sure you've had discussions with other city folks and whatever. But what direction are other people heading in? Not that that means specifically what, I'm just curious, did you glean anything from talking with people that you thought was?
Well, there's a range, because there's a little bit of giggling behind the hand going on. If you look at Miami's, they allow up to 1,000 units per acre. But their code is a form-based code that's based on all these transects. And you can't do anything in your transects that it's a certain percentage over what's next to you. So that just collapses everything based on your context, which is the whole point. So it's kind of cute to read there's some memos on it, and there's some ordinances already. Most of them are just memos. Coconut Creek just came out with their ordinance, which is, quite massive, like page after page after page, all these regulations that they're adopting to control these. By the way, they have one tax credit project in their whole town. So it's a wide range, but I think if you read, I can send you the memos that have been written. I have Tampa, I have Miami-Dade, I have Miami, and I have Coconut Creek. So the three biggies and a littly.
Okay.
And it's just interesting. I think that the way the legislature wrote this, they thought they were doing something awesome, but the whole all other things apply really puts a limit on the things they gave them for free.
Okay, I think I'd like to look at them
Yeah, I'll
personally.
send them to you.
Anybody else? Or does everybody want them, or?
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, would you mind just sending them to everybody? Because I know that probably somewhere between 3 and 5 people are going to ask me about this before it goes up the stairs.
Yeah, and it's probably, as more, see, this only really came into play on October 1. So October 1 was when the law said you had to have your publicly available lands map and list on the websites. So that's when we started getting all the calls. So,
Mr. Chairman, I think that there's so many communities, and not that we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a place where we have welcomed tax credit projects, where we have tried to encourage a range of prices in our housing and to do it in a way that makes it a livable community. We haven't always hit the mark, and we could always be better with it and have more of it. But this law was really, I think, a reaction to frustration that the legislature was hearing because so many cities and counties across the state were doing everything they could to keep low-income housing out of their cities. Yeah. It's why we see minor tweaks to our code, while other cities, like our neighbor Coconut Creek, is doing pages and pages and pages of ordinances because they still don't want any tax credit in their city. My big concern was that it not damage the work that we had done, and I think that the presentation here tonight has shown that it hasn't. I'm happy to change the 50 to 40, to pull that back to what we were trying to get to with the 20. But I think that we're going to have to kind of watch this unfold, because it is not going to work. It's another example of the legislature taking a one-size-fits-all approach to a very nuanced problem. But I think they felt like they had to start someplace. So I'm very happy that we don't have to change a lot of our codes because of this. But I think we're going to see a lot of difference and a lot of angst from a lot of cities who don't want this. Now, there aren't very many cities in the state that have the form-based code that Miami's got. It's going to be interesting to see what happens down there.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? All right. I guess with that, the chair will entertain I assume you want a motion, or, right?
Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to make that motion, and I'll make a motion that we amend the 50% to 40% as discussed earlier, and recommend approval of these changes as presented by staff tonight.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Saunders?
The only thing I would ask is that the board would allow our office to, where necessary, related to the legal constraints of the state statute, as well as the question that was mentioned tonight related to the AAC, that we would be allowed to amend where necessary.
I would accept that, the motion.
Sure. And the second, I'm sorry?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. So questions on the motion. I do think that, yeah, there's probably, I suspect that in some of the discussions and review of that I'm going to have, some things that come up between now and the time. When is it going to commission?
Let's see, we have November 14th and December, there's
So the
only
second-
one in each,
Okay, so the second one's in December.
oh, yeah.
The second hearing would be
That's
in.
what the goal is. Yeah, I already have my ordinances, so we should be able to meet the advertising deadline. Sometimes it's tight between P and Z and the
Okay.
very next meeting, but I think we'll be able to.
I think we,
No, I don't have my ordinance.
I think we really do want to have some input from the legal department, only because this is a little mind-boggling for me, and whatever. I think that we should, because once this gets in, then this isn't quite the same as us tweaking whatever, our stuff in overlay districts or something like that, where we do that once a year or whatever we do. This is going to have legal consequences that are pretty significant, or potentially could be significant. So I just want to make sure that we have had a full-throated review from the legal side.
And we have had discussions, that's how the definition of grocery store came up, so it isn't like they haven't seen it. And I do think that it's our concentration of poverty issues that would be the big thing if we were going to get sued. So the little stuff, they're going to work around it, but that whole 50% limitation, if they want to do 100%, that's where we're vulnerable. And actually, what our entire thrust has been with all this mixed income requirement is to support our concentration of poverty by proving that we're not anti-affordable housing with our deconcentration of poverty objectives. So this continues along those lines in terms of showing that we're not creating any blockages for this, we're not treating this like a pariah, and we're just integrating it into the housing incentive program that we already have.
Okay. All right, so we had a motion and a second, and are there any other questions on the motion? With that, Bobby, call the roll, please.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Joan Kovac,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes. Okay, I think that's the end of our regular agenda. I know there's a lot of folks here tonight. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to talk about something other than what was on the, whoops, come on up. Sir. Name and address.
Jason Fuller, 613 Northwest 16th Avenue, Pompano. So I came to speak regarding the item that was pulled. Some other questions may be asked, but in regards to 1900 Copens or KZ Copens, whatever name they decide to use or whatever, taking cemetery land and requesting a zoning change for warehouses. According to the thing that was in the back, they published something for everyone here tonight, even though they pulled it off the agenda. They still published what is to be a community meeting regarding improvements, and it says improvements that will be made to the Westview Cemetery. So I believe that they acknowledge that it's still cemetery property. There is no such thing as once a cemetery not being a cemetery again. There are tons of people that have testified that there are paupers' graves and there are decedents on the land that they've purchased, and they still, without regard to the community or what we say, they're still moving forward with trying to change the zoning of what is a cemetery. It would not happen in Pompano Cemetery. It would not happen in any other cemetery. Once a cemetery is deemed a cemetery, zoned a cemetery, and acts as a cemetery, you can divide it in 100 different places or 100 different ways. It is still a cemetery. So to add warehouses or anything, build an outhouse on a cemetery property, it is still a cemetery. One would agree, many would agree. It's still a cemetery, whether you add warehouses or not. So that's my statement in regard to the 1900 Copens. The thing they pushed out today, improvements that will be made to the Westview Cemetery. So it is still a cemetery that they're desiring to build upon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
How y'all doing? My name is Mary Baker, and I'm speaking about the cemetery too because I have family, friends, and a bunch of people that I know at the cemetery. And I don't think the cemetery should be built warehouses because it's only the memories of the people that we know. And why should they just come and destroy? Like he said, it's still a cemetery. And it reminds us, sometimes I even just go through there and stop just to look at some of my friends and my family, and it reminds me of my friends and family. So I took my time to come here and speak on my behalf. And that's all I want to say.
Okay.
Ma'am, could you just state your address for the record, too?
It's 427 Southwest 4th Court, Pompano Beach, Florida, Cypress.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
My name is Elijah L. Wooten. I reside at 135 Northwest 15th Street. I was born in Pompano. I've lived here all of my life. The only time I did not live in here is when I would attend the college. I was a veteran. I finished A&M. I worked in Cocoa for 1 year, and I've been in Pompano all of my life. The city of Pompano in the 1940s created the need for Westview Community Cemetery. They did it, we didn't. About 2 years ago, I attended a meeting, and the people that were purchasing, or about to purchase the land at that time, decided that they did not want to move forward. It was tabled. I'm going on record because I might not be here in November. My time is getting close. I get sort of upset when I do this. I went to Pompano Cemetery for the last 2 days to ride around. They don't have very many spaces left for people to be interred. I know of no other place in the city of Pompano, you have 15 acres of land that bodies can be interred, and everybody's sitting in the diocese is one day, you are going to go under somewhere. If it's not at Pompano, it's going to be at Westview. And you will have to decide, this board, the city commissioners, the zoning board of appeals, the court system is going to have to decide. Are warehouses more important than a cemetery? We are going to have to answer. And when I have to answer, I told them that they were wrong. You have a chance to justify that by recommending, I don't care whatever law you call. I was subpoenaed. I didn't ask to go. The deputy came and told me if I didn't appear, they would come take me to give a deposition. I gave that deposition on the oath. And they asked me, do I have an attorney? I told them I did not have, I don't know, I have to have an attorney. But I required them to give me a copy of it. As of today, I don't have a copy of it. So apparently they went to court with my evidence, and I don't know if they presented it. The city has an attorney. See, somebody give me 3 more minutes. Okay, I'll take his 3. I take his 3. I need to finish this before I finish. If you do not decide to undo what was done, now certain things you can do, I understand. As I understand it, before they come to you for a zoning hearing, you make your recommendation, or wrong, correct me, you make your recommendation to the commissioners. The commissioners then hear it. The commissioners make a decision. If the petitioner decided he wants or she wants, in this case, the LLC that wants to purchase that property or have already purchased it, they could go to the zoning board of appeals. Then it goes to the court system. Am I correct?
It's already been to the court system, I believe.
Yes.
But we're not actually having a hearing right now.
I'm asking a question. Procedurally, is that what happens?
Unfortunately, in this particular period of time, the audience to be heard is just singularly that. It's your opportunity with the time given for you to make your comment. There typically is no answers given to questions that you may pose, particularly when there's involving a litigation that happened outside of this board's jurisdiction. So there's no way for us to answer. This is a private matter.
So you're now saying that you can't, even if they come back in November, and you make a decision procedurally, does it go from you to the city commissioners?
That is correct.
Okay. From the city commissioners, they make a decision, and if the verdict is not like LLC, they can go to the court system?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Procedurally, how you handle it. So what we are doing today is, if it was on the agenda, it was pulled. We cannot discuss it, even though it was pulled. So what I'm saying to you today cannot be discussed. So I don't do virtual, but if they have in person, and I can afford to come back, I'll try the second time, and I will be better the next time than I am today. Thank you much.
Okay.
Hey, I know I'm kind of young, but I was like, I gotta come over here. My name is Deslyn Moore. I don't live in Pompano, but my family, we're all Pompano. I have a lot of family that is buried at that site. I can't count how many funerals I've been to since I was little. I just can't imagine that their bodies would just be built on top of to even have this type of conversation. It doesn't make any sense. I really need this. This needs to be fixed because it seems like our people, we always have to fight every time. We're just trying to have people rest in peace. Why do we have to fight? Why do we have to go through this? I bet no other race has to go through this but us. Why is this even a situation? That's my problem. When I heard about this, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, you're kidding. I heard about it Sunday. My auntie told me about it, and I was like, well, shoot, I gotta come over here because I just have to be able to talk and see what this is about. And even hearing that this was even pulled, that's unheard of. Why is our agenda always the back burner? I don't get the problem. And in all of the litigation, all this stuff, it just needs to be dealt with, at least for all of us to be able to talk about why is this even happening. And even if we still do talk, there needs to be an actual solution for us to actually have our people there and not have to worry about them being built on top of. This is nonsense. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Ed Phillips. I currently reside at 384 Northwest 19th Street, Pompano Beach, Florida. I want to start by saying when right stands up, wrong has to sit down, but wrong has to get a little push from right. And so having said that, I have stood in this hall many times over the years, and I've seen folks say things that we couldn't do, but we did it. And I want you to hear that clearly. Now, having said that, is it possible, can I get a copy, or we get a copy of the letter that was submitted to you to withdraw from this procedure? Because that letter would give you the reasons for why they wanted to withdraw. We would like to see that letter if we haven't seen that letter.
Go ahead, keep going. We're going to work on it here in a second.
Somebody needs to stop my minutes while they're doing this. Because I know how this thing rolls, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I can get your email, and I can email a copy of it to you, or Ms. Dolan can provide it to you by email.
Ms. Dolan, yes.
Ed, you know how to get to the agenda items by clicking on the blue link on the agenda, same as with commission. So all the backup is in the P&Z documents folder. Once you click on
The
it.
letter is in there also?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay. Are you going to restart my minutes? Okay. All right. Okay. Here's what's going on. In the city of Deerfield, in their cemetery, they're no longer accepting people to be buried there, not unless, I believe, if I know correctly, unless you live there or there's minimal land to be used for burying. So now, stick that over there. We come to the city of Pompano, and Mr. Wooten, he started out, I'm going to help him a little bit, if he will, when he said the city of Pompano created this problem because many years ago, we were not allowed, our family was not allowed to be buried in Pompano Cemetery. And so the history is that there was a plot of land given to us or awarded to us, and that land was for burial of folks in the Northwest. Of course, it has expanded, and other folks oftentimes get buried in the Northwest. My point here is that cemetery land can't be bought anymore. There's no more land for cemeteries. So listen, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to be visionaries. Where are we going to get additional cemetery land? We can't burn it. Some of us are religious. I'm playing on the time that you didn't give me. some of us are religious in natures, and we don't burn some of our folks. We bury them. And so I think you have a duty to this community because most of you live here and grew up here and know a lot of folks, to understand that you can, at some point in time, and I'm not talking specific, but you have the ability to deny. You really do, because I've seen you deny once again situations where they said it couldn't be done, but you did it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be short. Some of you know me, and I don't, I've gotten to the point sometimes I just want to sit down, but time and destiny won't allow it. So there are a lot of folks here tonight who feel that the cemetery land is sacred. This is but a few. We got thrown off a little bit because someone put out that the meeting was canceled and we shouldn't show up. But as you can see, even though that word went out so fast, there are still folks who care and came through and muscled through to make sure that you understood that how important this is. You don't see everybody that this is important to. You don't see everybody that this is important to, because some folks just won't come out to these events. But that little young lady almost shedded a tear because that young lady gave you the emotions of some of us older folks, that how serious and how important this is. History is going to be given here tonight. What side will you be on? Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Catherine Neal. I reside at 237 Northwest 15th Court. And I don't want to be redundant, but I have to be at this time at that graveyard there. I have my grandparents, grandmother and grandfather, a niece and nephew, and just recently, as of 2017, my brother was buried there. So what's supposed to happen at this point? What is my family supposed to do? I know you say you don't answer questions, but I need to know something. Somebody, anybody?
Ma'am, as I mentioned before, this is an audience to be heard, so you can make your comments.
Okay.
This board, because it's a matter that's going to come before them that's been postponed, they have no ability to respond.
Okay, so can I get that, some information emailed to me as Mr. Phillips just did?
Absolutely. Just speak with the...
Thank you.
Good evening. Respect to the chairman of the board here tonight and all of you all that are on the podium. My name is Eula Foster. I presently reside at 2856 Northwest 13th Street, Fort Lauderdale. I am an associate of Pompano Beach. I lived here for a number of years, and I also worked to help get the farm labor camp over here changed to Golden Acres and respected as concerning what it had been before. I'm here today because I'm very sad. Really, I'm very sad. 71 years ago, maybe more, this same place called the city of Pompano in this area. I'm saying that because of the cemetery over here in Pompano, Cross Federal Highway. Blacks couldn't be buried there. Am I correct? And I know you can't answer me, but I've been here a long time. You know, I picked beans all over this place with my parents. We were migrant workers. We were farm workers, going from state to state, city to city. So were we mistreated and discriminated against? Of course we was. My thing here this evening, you know, when are you supposed to get tired of being looked over, looked under, looked past? You know, nobody's paying attention. Why are we even discussing rezoning a cemetery? How many of you all would like somebody to come and rezone your cemetery where you got your loved ones at? It's ridiculous. We shouldn't even be discussing this. The cemetery is a sacred place for you to go and rest. That's what happened when Abraham lost Sarah. He went and bought a cave because he wanted a special place to go back and bury his dad. You know, and there was one person, they didn't even want their bones left in Egypt. What are we doing? Can we, think about it. You're dealing with something that's very tender. And if you want your name to stay good, it's probably pretty good right now. If you want the city of Pompano's name to stay good, you're going to get rid of this situation and, like the young lady said, fix it. Because this is ridiculous. Those people that started this, they knew better. They knew better. And you all act like, like you can just entertain whatever somebody bring before you. That's not fair. Be fair to the people of Pompano. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sonia Finney, 173 Northwest 15th Street, Pompano Beach, Florida. I also am here on behalf of Westview Community Cemetery, and I would just like to bring two things to your attention. The first being, I don't know how many of you all saw, there was a segment on black cemeteries on 60 Minutes last November and a follow-up segment done in August. And the story centered around Cemeteries 3 in Clearwater, Florida, that now have a corporate headquarters and a school and a couple other things, and built on cemeteries that were once black cemeteries. After doing some work, they found numerous belongings, rings, jewelries, bones, and things under those buildings, and now they're trying to figure out, how do we make that right? I don't know if the city of Pompano wants to be another Clearwater, if we want to be featured on 60 Minutes. The story was brought about by a professor at the University of South Florida who is working diligently with them. I've been in contact with her and said, we might need the same thing. We need you to come here to assist us. And that's what we're planning to do if we can't get the right thing done here. Because nobody has done any due diligence to see if there are bodies there. They want to rezone the land. Have they done any due diligence to find out if there's bodies there? The other piece of the equation is that there are numerous families that have been here for years that purchased land, purchased plots years ago, and so now you sell their land. Where are they supposed to be buried? If they bought and purchased plots and that particular land, what are they supposed to do now? Their money would just, what happens to their money? Where they paid to be buried at Westview Cemetery and paid, and now they're all of a sudden there's no documentation or records showing where their plots are. You've got people being buried there with in the wrong spaces. People paid for plots, and now their loved ones are being buried in other places, not in the spaces, because no one seems to have any accountability as to where, I should say there's no accountability and there's no proper documentation on where people are being buried there. So there are a number of issues with what's going on right now. It's my understanding the builder met with the community when he first started thinking about this project. The community said, we don't want it, but he ignored their request and has moved forward. And then tonight, we come and they don't show up here tonight, but they're so bold to put their design on a flyer and ask people to come and attend a virtual meeting right before, conveniently 2 days before the next zoning board meeting, so they can say that they met with the community. Is that right? No. So again, like all of these others, I ask you all to err on the side of what's right and do the right thing on behalf of the community of Pompano.
Good evening. My name is Willie Jones. My address is protected because of my previous employment. I stand here. I listen to what's going on. And the only thing that came to mind was, here we go again. We got developers, attorneys that sit on the east, that have a 6th-floor ocean view window, decided we need somewhere to build. Well, the only thing you have left is the black cemetery. Let's approach the city, because they're not going to protect the rights of their minority community, because it's economics that we're looking at. How many more tax dollars can we bring to the city of Pompano Beach? And to whose cost? Well, it's just the black community. Ho-hum, whatever. It don't mean nothing to me. My house is not on fire. I live somewhere else. My family is buried somewhere else. I don't have to worry about some rich developer with his high-powered attorneys coming to my community and saying he want to put a storage place. I don't care about your history. I don't care about your culture. I care about dollars. Here we go again. Now, I sit here and listen. We can't answer any questions. We're just being heard. Someone approached the city, this board, with the idea to build on their land, and it had to be a question asked. Had to be a question asked. Now you're twirling your thumbs, you're looking at the ceiling, you're looking at your watch. When can I get out of here? I'm tired of this. When we get these people out of here, because we're going to do it anyway. We don't care about what they think, what they want. Because if this board and the city commissioners really did, we would not be doing a rezoning. Everything starts and stops right here.
Good evening. My name is Janine Jones. I reside at 237 Northwest 12th Street in Pompano Beach. My feelings about this situation is very, very disrespectful. It was disrespectful for the company to even think about the land, period. One, how can somebody give away something that was never theirs? And then for anybody to approve for that area to be zoned for some storage or warehouses, I see enough storage and warehouses all over the place. So why do they need to come where we have our land that was donated? When Mr. Hunter did what he did it for a reason. He was giving back to his people. So how do we get to this place where somebody feel like, oh, we can do this and we can do, and you ain't doing nothing with the money you got? It's still a mess. But then here it is, like they said, why continue to keep taking? Because I'm gonna tell you like this, I'm looking at everything that's going on in the city. I'm looking at everything. And one of the things that I'm gonna take fall for, because I ain't been coming to no meetings, but I tell you what, y'all study building and building, you study trying to move us further and further west. Y'all need to quit. Because at the end of the day, let's be fair and let's be right. Because at the end of the day, when you can't open your eyes no more and your tongue is glued to the root of your mouth, you better be ready to answer God for all your wrongdoings you're doing. Because it's not right and it's not fair. When these people came and said, hey, we're looking at this part, y'all should have automatically said no. That is sacred land, that was donated land, and whoever the board was or whoever did what they did, y'all should have put a stop to it. Y'all knew all this stuff was illegal. So what that tells me is, if y'all know they was doing stuff illegal, how illegal are you? So if this is how y'all doing everything, continue to do. But when the shackles come up on your ankles and the shackles get on your hands, just say, I'm sorry, and keep it moving, because you know you're wrong. All of you. If you put it this way, I can't say all of you because you probably didn't vote that way. But if you did, and you had your hand in this foolishness, be ready to meet your maker and try to do what you got to do right. God give you time to make things right. He don't leave you hanging. He give you enough time. So do what's right, do what's fair, and leave that cemetery alone, and let these people, and let Mr. Hunter Dream live the way what he wanted. He left it here for a reason. He gave it to his people for a reason. Don't continue to keep taking. Stop. Tell me why nobody, all this land around here, they can't find nowhere else to build storage. Please, because I'm trying to figure it out. I know I walk by a whole bunch. It's a whole bunch of land over there, what, on 31st? Where y'all started finna build some more stuff. But everything is about what y'all want to do. Think about us sometime. Think about us and put yourself in our shoes, and maybe you'll do right.
Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for coming out. So the next item on our agenda is the board member discussion. We'll start at this end. Carrie Ann, do you have anything for us tonight?
Unfortunately, we can't address the audience, so no, I have nothing to address.
Legally, we can't.
Okay, thank you. Nothing to address.
Okay. Mrs. Kovac?
I have nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing from me.
I'm going to make you say something here soon. Mrs. King?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Mrs. Smith?
I want to thank Carla Coleman for stepping up and chairing the multimodal, am I saying that right? Committee, and for giving a year. I heard that there was a limit on that, but you just did a bang-up job with the preliminary, and I appreciate you stepping up.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay. Before, I guess most folks have gone, and I probably should have said this before, but don't forget, next month is the hearing here. And
November 15th.
so hopefully we'll see folks and probably see some more. So, okay. Mrs. Coleman, would you give us, I know you did last night at the commission meeting, but would you give us maybe just a quick overview of where you think this is going on your multimodal? Or not yours, our city's multimodal.
Well, the EDC's permanent committee on multimodal transportation issues. This board was good enough a couple of months ago to endorse the findings of the task force from this summer. EDC adopted them as well. Last night was the presentation to the City Commission. And the commission was very supportive of the timing and the ideas for us to take a look at transportation better integrated with both the built environment and the environment that we're building, and how to do some forward thinking on that. Now, I will be the first to tell everyone I do not have all the answers. I'm hoping to figure out which questions to ask. But EDC has created that permanent body, which will have a variety of city staff, city residents, city business owners on it, to take what we've done in the task force report and carry that forward into actionable items over the next several years, I'm sure. I have agreed to chair for the first year. I'm trying to stay out of divorce court. So I had promised my husband I was retired, but I'm looking very much forward to working with everyone to pull some things together for both city consideration and working with Kimley Horn on their study that they're doing to create Pompano's first transportation master plan.
Okay, thank you. I don't really have anything tonight. So, oh wait, I do have one thing. It's really quick. It's really quick. This is really quick. I did talk to Mike, to the building official, because I had some concerns about how little was on our agenda this month and also next month. So he said, boy, I wish you guys would stop sending us stuff. That's kind of was his comment. He said that internally they're extremely busy and they're expecting one of the major ones, and I hate to say which one, I can't, because I can't remember which one, but one of the high rises is on the beach is supposed to be coming out soon, I think, out of the building department. The second level of it, there was a foundation permit or something, and it's probably, which one is that? Which one has a foundation permit that they're doing on the south end? It's at 13. It's the farthest south one. It's not the one across from the apartments, right? Yeah, okay. So he told me that that building permit, I think, is the main building permit, because they have a foundation-only permit right now, and that the main permit would be coming out. I'm sure that if that comes out before the end of the year, it's going to be very significant, I would think. So that was my report from the building official. So I think we're still chugging along, looking like a record year. So, and with that, do you guys have anything? Staff have anything tonight? No? Max? Okay.
Hi, good evening. I'm Max Weems. I serve Development Services as a Sustainability Coordinator. I also do site plan review and zoning analysis and updates from time to time. And I'm sure you know, but Daniel Keister has left our division in a big void in our hearts. But in his absence, I'll be serving as the acting principal planner, and of course be applying for the position when it's posted. But should you need any assistance, I'll be, feel free to reach out to me in place of him.
So you'll be kind of the person in charge of DRCs and stuff?
Well, DRC is now being delegated to Lauren Gratzer.
Oh, okay.
So planner, but I'll be overseeing that process.
Okay. All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I think did you have something? No. Bobby, you're good? Okay. I don't have the town crier, so I have to do it myself.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Okay, so moved. We're done for the night.